Hello and welcome to a new retrospective where today I'm going to be talking about a classic Dynablaster clone called Bomber, which was released back in 1992 by a company called Kingsoft. And this was a game that was released on also the Amiga, the Atari ST and also the PC platforms. And at the time, Dynablaster or Bomberman was an extremely popular game, and at the time I remember Commodore Format started to advertise in their early warning scanner about a C64 conversion of the game coming out. The first time I sort of played it was on the Super Nintendo, and I absolutely loved being able to kind of play against up to 3 other players to try and blow the shit out of each other. And I was extremely excited for the 64 version to come out, and I remember seeing it on the early warning scanner and sort of anticipating it sort of coming out. The Amiga version eventually turned up, the 64 version sadly didn't. We were just kind of teased by these screenshots that appeared in various sort of magazines in the press, and that's all we ever got to saw. So, but at the time we didn't realise that the game wasn't coming out. So, by complete surprise, back in July of 1992, Zap64 on their issue 86 had a preview of a game called Bug Bomber. And I remember it was a particularly memorable issue because you had some fantastic games on that cover mount. Insects in Space was amazing, and Glider Rider with David Whittaker's music was really cool. Subsonic was a fantastic little shoot as well, and then Bug Bomber was just a complete, absolute bonus that appeared completely from nowhere because there was no real warning about the game. And seeing the screenshot in the magazine, I could see straight away it was a Dynablaster clone, and I was extremely excited to load it up for the first time, and I wasn't disappointed at all. Basically, the magazine was extremely generous. They rather than just giving one level away with the magazine, they kind of gave 20 away, so you could get a real flavour for the game and experience it properly. It almost felt like they'd almost given a sort of full game away. And I just played this demo to death, and those same 20 levels over and over again, and even played the multiplayer mode as well, so you could play up to 2 players in the demo. So it was quite good for when you had friends around and stuff. The main reason I sort of kept playing the demo to death is that I couldn't find the full version in the shops at all. So going into John Menzies or WH Smith's, just couldn't see it anywhere. And it was just by pure chance that my sister found the game in a shop in Canterbury called Computer World, and she snapped it up. And that was extremely lucky because the distribution for the game seemed to be pretty terrible. And it was the same really for Locomotion, which Kingsoft also released around about the same time. For some reason you just could not find the games anywhere, and as a result trying to pick up a copy now is extremely hard, and copies of the game fetch quite a bit of money on eBay, for example. But I absolutely fell in love with the game. There was so much to it. It wasn't just a Dynablaster clone. There was a lot more to it that you could do, such as the aspect of sort of laying eggs, which you'll see in a minute, and all these other bits and pieces that you could do. So I'm just going to kind of kick into it now, just give you a bit of a flavour for the game. So this is the really cool title screen that comes with the game. So I think it's a FLI based title screen. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because the extra colours in it looks really nice. And there's a really decent tune by Chris Hillsbeck as well, which fits the game perfectly. I don't think it was intended for the game originally, because in HVSC it's titled as something like VH title or something really odd. And I think this might have been Chris's last ever bit of 64 music as well, before he sort of moved on to other platforms. So on the title screen we've got quite a number of options that you can play around with. So you've got standard versus opponent or versus computer, and you can have up to 4 players if you want. So the good thing about the game is that you can have 2 players on joystick, and you can have 2 players also on keyboard as well. We're just going to do like single player mode against the computer, which is the standard levels of the game. The other thing I'm also do is increase the IQ of the computer, just to give a bit more of a challenge. This just means that enemies will kind of move out of the way of your fire and be a bit more intelligent with their movement and that kind of thing. If you have it on 0, it's a little bit too easy, I'd say. So with the game, you have this kind of energy system compared to Dynablaster, where you've got 100 on the right hand side, and dropping a bomb will kind of decrease that energy by 1 point. So what we need to do is try and pick up these EN blocks to kind of increase our energy as quick as we can. We've also got these IQ bits, which I'm not fully sure what they do, but basically the smiley face, that yellow face on the right hand side, will start to smile if we pick them up. Okay, so I think actually the IQ is to do with when you launch your own enemies. So if you have your own enemies, having a high IQ, I think, means that they're more intelligent hunting out the enemies and destroying them. So I'll explain a bit more about that in a moment. So these are quite basic enemies that we can easily pick off with bombs or just by using something called a thunderbolt. What I'm going to quickly do is just block myself off and explain about how sort of mechanism works. So that block that I just did there was just by pressing a single joystick button press. To drop a bomb, you have to hold down the fire button and press it up, which is a little bit clunky and one of the problems with the game. But because the 64 only had like a single joystick button, they kind of had to cram quite a lot into different combinations. So compared to Dynablaster, rather than just kind of dropping bombs and picking up different sort of power-ups, that from the off you can kind of lay your own eggs to do different functions. So firing left, you can sort of lay mines for enemies to kind of go across. Firing down, we can drop energy eggs, which is not much use in single player mode, but essentially when they hatch you can collect energy, so you can create reservoirs of energy if you wish and block it off. You've then got something called a painter egg. So if I do firing down twice, you can drop a painter egg, which means that if that hatches and goes across an enemy egg, it will paint it to your own colour, which means it becomes your own enemy when it hatches and works for you instead. Firing down 3 times will do what's called a cruncher egg to go off and sort of destroy blocks and eat blocks of the same colour. You've also then got a hunter egg, which you could drop by doing firing down 4 times, which then hatches this creature out, which goes and hunts the enemies off. The thing that I use the most is firing right to drop this kind of firebolt, which when an enemy passes in its path, it will kind of shoot off in its general direction. So I'll do that now. So they're trying to avoid it because the IQ is quite heavy. So I've accidentally dropped a block as well. So yeah, one of the things, because of the amount of different combinations you have, it's a little bit clunky to control, but so it takes a little bit of practice to get used to. So that firebolt is really handy. That's probably the thing you'll probably use the most to try and pick off enemies. So nice easy introduction to the game. As we progress through, we'll start to get different eggs hatch with different enemy types. So small purple eggs that hatch in. We can the good thing about the game is that you can blow these eggs up pretty early before they hatch. But if you're too quick, you can end up maybe making the game a little bit too easy. It's too easy to blow everything up before it has a chance to hatch, and then there's not a huge amount of chance to level. I'd say it's one of the main limitations of it. So yeah, it's not perfect. I mean, the main fun for the game is to be had from the multiplayer mode, like with most games. But still, the single player mode does stand up on its own fairly well. It just won't offer you a huge challenge. I think most people will get to the end pretty easily. They're kind of relying on you playing the multiplayer mode and getting the most fun out of that part. So now as we sort of progress through, it gets a little bit harder. The enemies start to appear a bit quicker. So when you get the enemies as well, they don't die straight away. They it drains some of their energy and slows them down. Sort of makes it a bit easier to pick them off. I think that's another one done. We should see these larger tank creatures a bit later on as well as we progress. See if we can find one of those quickly. We'll try and layer a few of these up. Yeah, there we go. So this green creature likes to block himself in. I'll just do a few more levels and then I'll call it quits, just so you can go and have a game for yourself. Yeah, it's a fairly obscure game on the 64 because I think when it came out it was fairly late, so most people, this might have just passed them by without realising. You may have even played it on the Amiga in particular. I haven't seen the Amiga version myself, but I've heard that it's pretty decent, so certainly worth checking that out as well. I mean, although it's not Dynablaster exactly, it was a pretty decent sort of compensation for the lack of that conversion. Unfortunately, we may never know exactly how good the official conversion was. It's a game that's still being searched for on GTW. But we were lucky in recent years to be sort of blessed by a pretty decent Bomberman clone called Bomberland, which was released by RGCD back in around about 2013. And if you haven't seen it, then you should definitely check that out. It's a proper decent Dynablaster clone, and a lot closer to the original game as well. Okay, so we've got one of the tank creatures there. That's extra large egg, I think, is one of these tank creatures which are a bit of a pain, and I think they shoot thunderbolts at you as well. I'm just going to have a look. This is actually the first time I played the game in quite a few years, so I think it does shoot at you. Let's find out. Yeah, there you go. And with the intelligence, they sort of tend to hide around the corner, so it's a bit tricky to try and pick them off. They take quite a few shots as well. So as soon as that large egg sort of hatches, that's the first one you really want to go for. There we go. Okay, so that is Bug Bomber on the Commodore 64. Definitely worth checking out if you want something a little bit different and you're a bit bored of the standard sort of Dynablaster genre. This does offer you a little bit something different. I recommend, if you can, try and play it with some other players. That's certainly where, like with Dynablaster itself, it comes into a lot more fun. It becomes a lot more fun to play. But if you are by yourself, then there's a reasonably decent game there to play as well. And this is certainly one of my favourite childhood games. A lot of fond memories playing it, and sort of when I had friends around playing against them as well. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we'll see you soon for the next one.